Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
My grandparents ranched near the Middle Loop River, where we used to whack bullheads with cane poles and feed them to snapping turtles the size of truck tires. Some of my fondest childhood memories are of summers in Nebraska. And as my guest today will explain, there's plenty of reasons to revisit the playground of my youth armed with a fly rod. Eric Einspahr, welcome to the February Room.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, yeah, and did I say your name, your last name? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct. Eric Einspahr. That's a tricky one, but you got it. So,
well, all righty, Eric. I'm excited to talk Nebraska fly fishing and learn more about your organization. But we always kick things off here with a fishing story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, when we think of the fly fishing world, Nebraska doesn't come immediately to mind. And, our Game and Parks department here in the state recognizes that. And a few years ago, they started a angler recognition program that they call the Nebraska Trout Slam. And believe it or not, you can actually fly 5 species of trout here in the state of Nebraska: rainbow, brown, brook, cutthroat, and the tiger trout. So to encourage people to fish the state, the state Game and Parks office said, we're going to recognize any angler who can go out and catch all 4 of these. And when this first came out in about 2018, I went, wow, that is totally me. I'm going to go out and be one of the first people to do this. Well, the rainbows, they stock throughout the state. The brown trout we have in a few streams up kind of by the Valentine area, kind of northern Nebraska, if you're familiar. But the last 2, the brook trout and the cutthroat trout, are only found in the Pine Ridge area. Now, I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Our 2 big cities are in the eastern part of the state. That's way out in Chadron and Crawford, Nebraska. It's like a 6.5-hour trip one way just to get out there. And so I took my first trip out to Fort Robinson, Nebraska, beautiful area in the Pine Ridge of Nebraska if you've never been there, and went to find that brook trout and that brown trout. Well, I couldn't get it. It took me 6 trips before I finally got my brook trout. And one of my trips, I teach intro to fly fishing here at the University of Nebraska, along with a friend of mine, Jim. And we always take our class up to the Black Hills. So one of these trips I went, okay, Fort Robinson is right there. It's an hour south of the hills. I'm going to kind of swing through there, take an extra day, and go find my brook trout. I think this was trip number 4 out there. And I took a fishing buddy of mine with me too. And he was trying to get the trout slam, but he knew how intensely I was after this. And we spent 2 days on these little tiny trout streams out there. And I caught plenty of brown trout, but I could not find my brook trout. And finally, the last morning, we're supposed to meet the class in Rapid City. My friend who I co-teach the class with is calling, like, where are you at? You need to get here. We're an hour and a half away. And I'm like, I got to get this brook trout. So my friend Matt and I, we go up Middle Soldier Creek, it was, and I said, I'm just going to burn through water and fish as fast as possible. One last ditch effort to get this brook trout. And I'm throwing little flies in all the pools and the runs. And we come up to this spot that I now call Just a Brown Bend. And I fish this pool and nothing happens. And my friend Matt's looking at his clock like, we got to go. And I throw this hopper dropper right up this last run. And as it drifts down along a cut bait, boom, there's this big splashy explosion out of the water. And my line goes down and my rod doubles over. And I start playing this fish. And we're talking like a stream that's like 18 inches wide, right? This is a huge splash for where I'm at. And I get the head of this trout up out of the water. And I look at it and I go, it's just a brown. It wasn't my brook trout. And my friend Matt standing behind me, he goes, if you're disappointed in that fish, I don't think we can be friends anymore. It was a nice brown, but gosh, it just wasn't my brook trout. I eventually got my brook trout. It took me about another 6 or so months, another 2 trips, but I eventually figured out what I was doing wrong. But if you want to fly fish trout in Nebraska, I got to tell you, it might not be the spot that comes to your mind, but if you want a challenge, boy, that little pin and certificate the state will send you, that's quite an accomplishment in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. Were you among the first to accomplish that feat?
I was not. I think I was in the 30s somewhere is where I ended up. So
Well, that's not bad. That's not bad.
no, I'm happy with that. I think somewhere around 200 people, I haven't looked at the stats recently, have finished it in total since 2018. I am happy to say I finished it 3 times and I'm one species short of my 4th time. So I figured out what I was doing wrong, but it took a lot of learning, a lot of on the water time to do it.
So are those, you mentioned cutthroat. What's the story on the cutthroat? Are those a native species of cutthroat that are out in the Pine Ridge area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not a biologist by training by any means. I'm an educator, but I believe if any trout was native to Nebraska, it would be the cutthroat trout. I don't think there's ever been a proven link. It's just kind of a theory at the moment. The state has been really good about trying to capitalize on our cold water resources. And so one of the things they've done is in appropriate watersheds, they've tried to introduce the cutthroat trout. I'm not sure where our trout come from. I believe they're Yellowstone cutthroat trout. But I think we do them in a fish trade. And it's just supposed to be one of those opportunities to get people out and exploring the state and the great fishing opportunities that we have here. So.
Well, then that Pine Ridge area, as you mentioned, if for folks that have never been out there, it really is beautiful country. And it's not what you would necessarily think of when you think of Nebraska. So if you haven't spent some time in that western part of Nebraska, it is definitely worth a look.
Oh, absolutely. Contact the club. We'd be happy to give you some information. But Fort Robinson, Nebraska, State Park, it's a preserved Army fort from the 1880s and World War I and II. A lot of history there, but boy, there's some really unique fishing opportunities you wouldn't think of when you think of Nebraska. So,
I bet there's some hidden gems out there. You mentioned your club, and you're the president of the Cornhusker Fly Fishers. Is that correct?
I'm the previous past president. I served as president during the 2021 year. I'm currently the club secretary. So it's kind of like once you get sucked into these types of things, it's hard to leave, right? And part of that is that the club is important to so many people, but part of that's just how much fun I have interacting with the other club members and just talking about fly fishing, and especially in a place where people don't always think of fly fishing. So,
and is the club based in Lincoln?
I would say we're a Lincoln and Omaha based club. Our membership is probably pretty equally split between the two cities.
And how many members strong is your group?
Right at the moment, we're about 130 anglers.
Wow, that's a good sized group.
Yeah, and it's been really exciting is, when I was president was kind of right in the heart of the pandemic. And so we had to make a lot of choices about, what can we and can we not do? We were really worried about membership kind of falling off. But if anything, we actually saw our membership grow a little bit. I don't need to tell you, fly fishing got pretty popular when there wasn't a whole lot else to do around the country. And, the same was true right here in Nebraska. And we actually ended up teaching a lot of people to fly fish. So.
Oh, that's really cool. And I imagine that you do a mix of local outings and some travel trips as well. You mentioned the Black Hills.
Yep, absolutely. We always take our UNL fly fishing class to the Black Hills. Our current president, I know, is out there right now. I'm here at work, but she's blowing up my phone with all sorts of pictures of places I should have gone while I was up there last week. We do focus a lot on local angling. And here in the Lincoln and Omaha area, our closest trout stream is about 3 hours away. It's a beautiful little place called Verdigris Creek. It's a little diamond in the rough. But, a lot of our kind of daily outings are probably more for things like bluegill, crappie, bass. And we've got a pretty sizable chunk of the club that likes to go for, I've heard them called golden bones, the common carp. And
Sure.
I kind of like to go for some short-nosed gar. We have those right here in Salt Creek and Lincoln. And, a lot of these species that maybe aren't on a lot of people's radar. So we do a pretty good mix of the trout passion plus kind of a lot of the stillwater fishing too. So.
Well, yeah, and all those species are so much fun to catch on a fly rod. I mean, like you mentioned, bluegill, gar, fishing on the fly is becoming more and more popular. Mm-hmm. There's opportunity in every state. I think, the fly fishing industry has kind of associated fly fishing with trout, but there's no reason to do that. There's a lot of opportunity. Any pond that holds water, welcomes a fly rotter because there's something in there that'll eat a fly usually just as well as a worm.
Yeah, that's been one of the things that I have always found as I've gotten deeper into fly fishing is just about any fish will take a fly. And, gar have been one of my favorite little surprises. They swim just about in every creek in Nebraska. A lot of us are close to larger impoundments. Here in Nebraska, we've got Branched Oak Lake pretty close to Lincoln, but my parents live down close to the Harlan County Reservoir. Those are waters that have white bass and wiper in them. A lot of fun to chase those on a fly rod. I don't know if you've ever caught a wiper, but
yeah, they're great.
That's the closest thing that I found in Nebraska to hooking a bonefish. So
yeah,
once
for
you
sure.
hook those, they take off. So
yeah, they're great fish. It's funny, I live in Missoula, which is obviously, a mecca for trout fishing. And here, as soon as we're done with this podcast, my wife and I are going to go chase pike.
Yeah.
I do a lot of bass fishing. Like when I have days off, I guide for trout, and I love trout fishing, and I go trout fishing frequently. But more and more, if I have a day off, I go try to target something else, a pike or a bass. And I just love fishing for, what quote unquote warm water game species. They're just sight fishing opportunities are amazing. And, when one of those fish decides to commit to a fly, it's just such an exciting take.
Oh, absolutely. And I think another kind of advantage to being an angler in southeast Nebraska, where we're fishing a lot of impoundments or a lot of warm water streams, is it really forces you to read the water quite a bit. On my recent trip to the Black Hills here, one of the things I felt like I really excelled at is I could look at, like, say, a pool and kind of figure out the structure and where the fish might be. Because when we're fishing in still water here in southeast Nebraska, it's really kind of your only go-to. You can't see the fish in some cases in those impoundments. Gosh, I sure like it when I can sight fish to them, but we get a rain, our impoundments muddy up, and you're kind of fishing structure and cover and stuff like that. So in a lot of ways, being a stillwater angler kind of helps you to figure out where fish are hiding inside of a water body. So at least my thoughts. So
Definitely. What about the Niobrara River? That place is so pretty. I've driven over it several times on my way over to wherever I was going, from Montana to the upper Midwest usually. And I've always been really curious about that river, and I want to go camp along that and fish it sometimes. What kind of angling opportunities are in the Niobrara?
Oh, great question. Well, I'm going to name a couple of tributaries first, specifically for trout fishing. I mentioned earlier Verdigris Creek, kind of northwest of Norfolk, Nebraska. Great place. Our Game and Parks office keeps that well stocked. It's a kind of managed to be a high intensity fishery, I think they call it. And then there's Long Pine that's a little bit west of there, kind of my favorite creeks. Both of those are Niobrara tributaries. Now, I mentioned those because they have public access. And so the state of Nebraska, the way our water access rights work is the farmers own the land bottom. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of great places to wade fish the Niobrara. Now, I know it's really popular to float the Niobrara. I've never done that. I'm sure you could throw a line out there while you can. Way out there in western Nebraska, I know we do have a little bit of public access on the Niobrara by agate fossil beds. Cool place to check out from a tourism standpoint, but there should be some space in there. But, that's one of our big challenges here in Nebraska is that we just, we've got to love what little public water we have. Nothing against the farmers. They came from that background, but, that's kind of where I said we've got our diamonds in the roughs. Sometimes it's a little tough to find that public access. So,
well, you mentioned Norfolk, and that reminded me of my dad used to share this little song with me. Do you know the song for Norfolk?
I don't know if I do.
We are the girls from Norfolk. We don't drink. We don't smoke. Norfolk, Norfolk, Norfolk.
I have not heard that one. So,
as I mentioned, my uncle lives in Omaha, and he's taken up fly fishing in his retirement between his golf habit. And he shared with me a story prior. I mentioned that I was going to be speaking with you, and he said, "Okay, well, you got to share with Eric the Gracie Creek debacle." And
okay, I know Gracie Creek. Yeah. Okay.
So when my dad and my mom left Nebraska in the 60s and moved to Bend, Oregon. My dad loved the mountains. They used to go to Colorado and ski. And Once he finished law school at the University of Nebraska, he pulled up stakes, grabbed my mom from the farm, and headed out west. So, he loved to fly fish, and when he would go back to Nebraska to visit, he was always sharing stories with my uncle, and so he took him to Gracie Creek to go teach him how to fly fish, and this must have been in the 70s or something. And said they got to the creek and there was no water in it at all, and so
That sounds like Gracie
Creek. It was a failed mission. But Jim wanted me to ask you if that creek has any water in it now, and he was of the understanding that there were some efforts that had been done to put fish in there.
Yeah, so right there, I believe Gracie Creek dumps into Calamus Reservoir, if I remember correctly, and there's what we call Gracie Creek Pond that kind of right at the where that meets up with Calamus Reservoir, and I know there's fish and trout in that. They keep that well stocked. Above that, my understanding is there is plenty of water and plenty of fish in there. I've never fished it because I've been told that public access is pretty short on the creek itself, and I'm not sure what the access is above the pond. I usually keep on rolling towards Long Pine, which is only another hour or so up the road, which is kind of my favorite trout stream in the state. So.
Gotcha. Well, my grandfather was the sheriff of Lancaster County.
Okay.
And my dad actually grew up, spent part of his childhood living in the jail.
Okay.
And he called it Hotel Gray Bar. And my dad's childhood neighbor was one Charles Starkweather. And
I know that name. I think most Nebraskans do.
I would think so. And when Starkweather was arrested, he was put in the custody of my grandfather, and Carol Ann Fugate, his girlfriend, too, in the custody of my grandmother. And so that's a big part of our family lore. Is the Charles Starkweather murders, and there's obviously been plenty of documentaries and everything on that. So that's just such an interesting story that all Nebraskans generally know, but till recently, outside of the Midwest, the Starkweather murders kind of flew under the radar.
Yeah. Gosh, I remember watching a documentary on that when I was a kid. So my grandparents used to talk about that too. So
yeah, he was really like the first kind of serial killer, if you could call him that, mass murderer anyway.
Right.
Yeah, they were the Bonnie and Clyde of Nebraska, and crazy that he was actually my dad. I didn't realize he was my dad's neighbor. My dad told me that later in life, and when they arrested him. Took him into custody, one of the first things he asked was, "How's Denny?" And my dad's name was Dennis. So,
I'll be darned.
Yeah. So, does your club? Do you guys go out of state? Have you ever fly fished in Montana or anything, Eric?
We do. And so that's been one of the great parts about meeting a club. And so, I'll kind of self-identify as I'm part of the millennial generation. And I kind of feel like, generally speaking, millennials aren't really prone to join clubs. And, if you're a millennial out there or a Gen Zer who fly fishes, gosh, I was reluctant to join a club at first, but after I did, I met a lot of great fishing buddies, my age, older than me. And one of the best things about that is being able to go out of state and make trips and make things happen. I got to fish the Yellowstone River with a club member last summer. We kind of did a family vacation where we both met our families in the same spot, and then we snuck away to float to Yellowstone for a day. That was fantastic. Just this spring, a bunch of club members got together and went and floated the North Platte River in Wyoming, the Grays Reef area.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So that actually might become a club tradition now. That was such a good time. So, yeah, that's the cool part I'd say about joining the club is, not only is there a lot of things that I've learned, right, but gosh, the ability to, like I said, my phone's blowing up with an out-of-state trip right now that I'm just not on. So, the Black Hills have been great. I know people try to go down to the Arkansas. We might not have trout right here in Lincoln, but we've got the driftless regions about 5 hours away. Southern Missouri, the Ozarks aren't far away. We're about 6 hours from Colorado, from like Rocky Mountain. It's a little bit of driving, but we're really close to a lot of these really neat areas. And so I think that's the cool part about being here. And it's never tough to find somebody who wants to go. So.
Yeah, right. That's you guys are kind of, obviously centrally located to a lot of fly fishing opportunities. And the Platte in Wyoming is, kind of essentially your home waters, just a little further upstream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I made a joke where we were eating lunch, the wind picked up and kind of took the wrapper that my cookie away from me. And, I tried to leave no trace. That one got into the river and floated downstream. And the guide kind of gave me a hard time. And I said, well, the joke's on me. In about 4 or 5 days, it'll be in Nebraska. So
I'll pick it up when it gets here.
Right.
And all right, you referenced bone fishing. Have you had a chance to do some saltwater fishing?
I did. I got my first chance to go saltwater fishing just prior to the pandemic. My wife and I took a trip to the Cayman Islands. And so not necessarily it's not the Bahamas or something like that you think of, but I got to go down there and kind of accompany my wife on a work trip. And while she was busy, I was like, oh, yeah, I know what I'm doing while I'm down here. And I got to tell you, bone fishing is one of the most fun things I've done with a fly rod. I am awful at it, but it is one of the most fun things I've done with the fly rod. So
yeah, it is so much fun. I just love being able to go out there by yourself and just walk on a flat for hours and yeah, even if you don't catch any, it's just such a surreal experience just being in those amazing surroundings.
I hooked 3 and landed 1, but
there you go.
Because I didn't have a guide, I think it's 7 Mile Beach there in the Caymans, where all the hotels are on. I just brought my fly rod in the mornings and I walk up and down the beach and, caught things like snapper. And I was trying for a cuda. I did sight cast to a shark for a little bit, but I couldn't get it to turn. I don't know what I would have done if I would have hooked it, but I ended up catching like 8 or 9 different species of fish. I caught a puffer fish with my guide too, which was funny. I wanted to picture with it. He made me hold it in a towel, wouldn't let me hold it up or anything like that. So I've got a really funny picture of me holding this puffer fish in this giant towel. But that was a trip, and I can't wait to get back to the salt. I'm definitely hooked on that. So.
Yeah, I understand you don't want to DIY fillet the puffer fish your first time.
No, I'm pretty strictly catch and release, but I had no problem letting that one go. That was never a consideration. So.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, do you think Scott Frost is going to be able to turn this thing around?
Oh gosh, I sure hope so. He was the guy I wanted coming in here. Yeah, you can't talk to a Nebraskan without football coming up.
No,
right?
No, you can't.
Yeah, so I feel pretty good about it this year. Gosh, I think part of it is just, bad timing, right? We got that very first game canceled with that rain out. I was there. I watched kickoff and spent the next 3 hours under the stands waiting for the rain to go away. And I always wonder what would have happened if you would have won that game, right? But the pandemic.
It was tough, man. Those first several games were brutal. They easily could have gone the other way.
Oh, absolutely. But gosh, I think we're right there on the cusp, and just a couple of breaks going the other direction. I think we'll be right there. I feel good about this year, so I'm definitely still sitting in the sands. That's about the one thing that takes me away from the fly rod. So.
Right. Yeah, that's like you mentioned. Nearly every Nebraskan is a fan. Being in Nebraska on game day is one of the coolest experiences. There's a whole culture around that football program, and there's tailgates going on at rest areas along the interstate. I remember we went into a Wendy's somewhere. I think it was in. What's the name of the town where Cabela's started?
Sidney, Nebraska.
Sidney, yeah. I believe we were in Sidney. We went into a Wendy's, and there was a gal, playing an organ in there, and everybody dressed up in their Husker regalia. It was amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. A little bit of trivia. Apparently, our legendary Tom Osborne is a fly fisherman.
Not surprised.
And so I think it was in 2016 or 2017. I'd have to look, but they actually have a picture of Tom sitting in a canoe with a grandkid, I believe, taking a picture of a fish. Now, you can't tell it's Tom just by looking at it because he's got the picture and stuff held up. But apparently, Tom was on our fishing regulation guide several years ago. I found that out recently. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm not surprised that he's a fly fisherman. He's he's a pretty clever guy.
Yeah. Yep. I'd love to get him to come talk to the class sometime, about fishing. I'd love to talk to him about football too. I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times, but never got a chance to ask him about fly fishing. So
cool. Over here, Gonzaga University, which is obviously a basketball powerhouse, and their coach Mark Few is a really avid fly fisherman, a steelhead angler. And I've got several buddies that have actually had a chance to fish with him too. So we would love a chance to get him on the podcast sometime, man. And boy, that'd be a dream to get Osborne on here. Why don't you work on that? Why don't you work on that for us? You get Osborne lined up, and I'll give you a free 3-day guided fishing trip with a buddy in Western Montana. How's that for a deal?
Sounds like a great deal. I'll see what I can do.
So. Awesome. As far as your club goes, I imagine you guys have, fly. I saw some of your fly of the month stuff, and one fly that stuck out to me in particular was the Corn Fed Catus. What's the story on the Corn Fed Catus? That's a good looking fly.
Yeah, so every year the president kind of gets to select a fly of the month for each month, and it's a tying contest for members. You tie your best fly, and we used to do it in person before the pandemic. We moved it to an online voting on Google Docs during the pandemic, so we have something the club could keep doing. Well, after we started meeting in person again, the club loved it so much we've kept it online, because it's easy to still vote and participate if you're not at the meetings. The Corn Fed Catus is one of Tammy's flies. Tammy's out there somewhere, I'm sure. I have no idea where she came up with that. For those of you not familiar with the pattern, it's a little bit similar to an elk hair caddis, but it uses a lot more CDC feathers, and it does kind of look like a piece of corn with a caddis wing or something like that. I know she thought that was a pretty appropriate fly for our club for a contest. Unfortunately, I thought I tied a darn good fly, and I don't even think I placed that contest. So
maybe it was rigged.
Yeah, we did do in December too. If you look at our logo online, we've got the little the corn of cob kind of on a hook with the corn leaves on it, and we did that for our December fly. That was my final fly as president, and the winning fly for that was pretty darn good. I think those are on the website, and so now I've got to actually go out and try to catch a fish with the corn cob fly. I have not tried that yet, but it's getting to time I think I could pull it off. So.
And that's cornhuskerflyfishers.org, right?
That's correct. Yep, absolutely.
And your Instagram handle is just at Cornhusker Fly Fishers. And I imagine that you folks bring in speakers and presenters from around the country, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always do a big event that we call the Spring Fling, and we try to get a national speaker. Our most recent one was Kirk Dieter, which was really exciting, from Trout Unlimited.
Who apparently
has a fishing buddy in the club. So that was cool to get to meet Kirk, and he autographed a book for me and my daughter, which is really neat. Great guy. I'd love the opportunity to actually fish with him instead of just picking his brain. We've been trying to get Tom Rosenbauer from Orvis lined up. We've had some problems with the pandemic, but I anticipate that that'll be one of our big ones. But I know Charlie Craven in the past has spoken to the club. The first one that I got to see was Blaine Chocolate, which was nice. A fly tire. He tied some of his game changer patterns right before his book came out. Wow, that was really cool to stand up next to him while he was tying some flies. So yeah. And then during the year, we usually have a monthly meeting. And at those meetings, in the summer, we actually try to get at a lake and just kind of fish together. We also have a lot of people who just come out and say, I want to learn to fly fish. And yeah, great. Show up to the meetings when we're fishing. And even if it's an indoor meeting, we'll go outside with the fly rod and teach to cast. But we usually have some more local speakers. I'll give a shout out to Daryl Bauer with Nebraska Game and Parks. He's our fisheries information manager. You want information on fishing in Nebraska? Daryl Bauer's your guy. I believe it's daryl.bauer at nebraska.gov. But then we have people from the NRD spoke at one of our meetings talking about some of the water control projects and water, just some of the new impoundments and things like that have been built that provide some recreational activities. So it's a great way to learn about the fishing opportunities, where they stand. We try to do something just kind of the state of Nebraska fisheries, as well as we do a lot of tactics and stuff like that. So I know one of these days coming up, I'll be doing my Nebraska trout fishing presentation. If you check out our Facebook page too, during the pandemic, we did virtual meetings. Larry, the president before myself, and I kind of did some meetings where you can still access those videos. There's a great one on trout fishing in Nebraska, as well as bass fishing and bluegill fishing. Probably would apply to any part of the state, or any part of the country for bluegill and bass, that is, yeah.
Excellent. Now that name Bowers, my uncle mentioned a gentleman, I think his name is Jim Bowers, and he said that they have a a kids fishing event under the name of like the Jim Bowers fly fishing. Is that ringing a bell at all? Is that the same family? Do you know? Or
It's not ringing a bell for me. But what I will say is another thing. There's two things that the clubs are really active. The club is really active in. One is through the Nebraska Youth Fishing Program. We do Discover Fly Fishing Days all throughout the state. We've got one coming up here at Conestoga Lake, I believe, on June 12th. Another great opportunity put on by Game and Parks, but we'll be there with fly rods to teach how to fish, right? And I know we do that throughout the state throughout the year. The other big thing we do is Project Healing Waters fly fishing. We've got a chapter in Omaha, a chapter in Lincoln, and we're just starting one in the Tri-City area, Kearney, Grand Island, Hastings. There's a meeting coming up about that on Friday, I believe. That's another great opportunity if you're a veteran and you want to volunteer or participate. There's club members there who we teach casting, we teach tying, and I know there's some really cool opportunities through that program. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah. We've actually had a representative from Project Healing Waters on our podcast. It was back one of the earlier episodes, 15 or somewhere in the top 20 episodes. So yeah, we are familiar with that organization. They do some amazing stuff. You are also, an employee of the University of Nebraska, the Retention and Student Success Coordinator.
That is correct. And so, hopefully you can tell I'm pretty passionate about fly fishing. It's something that's, meant a lot to me. I've been doing it for about 11 years now. But it's not my day job. I wish I got paid to fly fish as a career, but unfortunately, I can speak about my current job just as accurately. But I do a lot of things for the College of Engineering here around data analytics, understanding how we can better produce engineers, as well as things like if the students just kind of run into some hard times, financially or emotionally or anything like that. I'm supposed to be kind of that first line of defense to kind of a case manager type person too. And I can talk about this job just as passionately as I can talk about fly fishing too.
And you do some, you mentioned you take some students fishing too. Is that part of your university gig, or do you do that through the club?
So I actually found that before I joined the club. And so as a university employee, there's some unique opportunities. Well, one of them is we'd offered this fly fishing class as a rec class, campus recreation class, ODED 107A. We teach it in the spring. It's worth 1 credit hour of PE credit, so it counts for a free elective for students. And the guy who used to teach it just retired and wanted to see it keep going. So he reached out to me. He knew me through the youth fishing program, and another gentleman, Jim, who I co-teach the class with, and just asked if we'd keep it going. And that's kind of how it started. So every spring semester, we have about 14 to 15 undergraduates or graduate students that, some of them are just people who've tried to fly fish before and it didn't work. Every once in a while, we get a student who shows up to the first day and goes, well, I just wanted to learn how to fish. I didn't know it was fly fishing. And we'll teach you to fish. And every once in a while, we get an international student that's really fun, who's never done anything like this. And they just I want to do something new while I'm here in the United States. And that's a really cool experience too. So.
Well, that's great, Eric. It sounds like you've had a lot of opportunity to influence people and introduce them into the sport on several different fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about. I like to joke that teaching people to fly fish is just about almost as good as actually going fly fishing yourself. So I do get a lot of enjoyment out of, teaching people to cast as well as seeing them catch their first fish on a fly. So.
Yeah, a fishing buddy of my dad's used to say, give someone a fish, you feed them for a day. Teach someone to fly fish, and they'll be in your damn water for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I've heard the same expression, but I think my wife would say, teach a man to fly fish, and he'll buy 20 fly fishing poles and all the fly tying materials he can find. And yeah.
Yeah, blow your retirement.
That's right.
Well, great. And I understand you've got another yarn for us. So I'd love to hear another personal account of your fishing adventures.
So I kind of told a personal fishing story. I'm going to kind of go back to my class. And like I said, that class has been a really meaningful experience for us. And, here in Nebraska, people just don't think about fly fishing. And one of my students was an identical twin, and his twin went to the University of Wyoming and then got mad because his twin, his brother here, Josh, was able to take fly fishing in Nebraska, and at University of Wyoming, they apparently don't even have a class on this.
Slackers.
I know, you'd think they'd have it out there, but anyways, and the first year we taught the fly fishing class, one of the things that we struggled with in our early years was finding a location to teach casting. Here in Nebraska in January, February, it's not exactly real warm outside, so we can't really go outside and teach casting. So if you're familiar with the University of Nebraska campus, we had the old Mabel Lee Hall, and it's gone now, but it had some basketball courts on the second floor, and that's where we used to teach casting. And so, you're teaching new casters. There's a lot of break in the wrist, a lot of elbows that are kind of moving all over the place, a lot of really open loops. And so one night we had some students, we got fly lines caught in the basketball goals. We had them even get up into the rafters of this basketball arena. But one student just threw this wide open loop, widest loop I've ever seen. And that fly line with the little yarn fly we tied on him for class ended up all the way in the ceiling and wrapped itself around one of the fire extinguishers. Those little water things that stick out the top?
Yeah, that can't be easy to get off.
Oh, yeah. And this thing was like 30 foot up in the air. So we're standing here at the, end of class Gemini, and we're looking at this thing going, well, if we pull it, is it going to set the fire sprinkler off, right? Because we think it's going to set it off in the entire building. And this is an academic building, right? My boss's office was on the floor below me, right? The dean of the college. And I was like, I don't know enough about this thing to pull this line and potentially set this off. So we go and we find the custodian who has no idea what to do. And he ends up going to the campus rec office and brings another custodian over. And, this is like an hour after class now, and this gym is used for other purposes. And I guess the next class behind us was the ping pong class or the ping pong club. I don't know if you've seen the videos of the guys like hitting the ping pong back and forth, but they've got tables all around us standing in the middle of this gym with a line stuck around the top. And the two custodians are standing there and saying, well, I don't think it'll set the fire extinguisher off. And the other guy goes, okay, then you pull it. So it ended up taking like an hour and a half for building and maintenance to get over there and get one of those big giant ladders that they use to change the light bulbs. And as soon as they get up there, they barely touch the thing and it just flutters to the ground. But man, I gotta say, like teaching fly fishing, one of the funnest parts have been like all of the crazy stories that you come across. We get a lot of kids who grew up, like I did, fishing for walleye and catfish and stuff like that. And I had another student who we kind of got into the bluegills and spawn in the class at Holmes Lake here in town. And the little bluegills have those little ring rises, and I tied on a little elk-hair caddis for him and say, throw it out there in the middle of one of those rings. And he lays it down perfect. And I said, as soon as you see a ring, set the hook. And so we saw this ring, and out of the corner of my eye, I watched his left hand come from his hip all the way up and grab the back of the rod behind his reel. And this kid sets this fly rod like he's setting it on a 30-pound catfish or something like that. And that poor little bluegill went up out of the water over the jetty we were standing on and landed in the lake behind us. And he climbed up the rocks and played it on the other side of the jetty and got it in. And it's just teaching people to fish. It's just a riot, and you learn a lot too, because I've seen a lot of students, who approach things that I've never thought about approaching fly fishing before, right? I've got a few fishing buddies who don't fly fish, and I've learned a lot that's made me a better fly angler from watching them or watching, beginners, kind of take to a fly rod. If you've never done it before, it's a great experience. And, for me, my dad, my grandpa, my late uncle, they're the ones who got me passionate about the outdoors. And so for me, this is a pay it forward type of thing. So somebody did it for me. I want to do it for the next generation to, make sure it's still there and it's still meaningful for people in the future. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of it if you can't tell it. So.
Well, good on you. Well, the organization is cornhuskerflyfishers.org. The Instagram, again, is Cornhusker Fly Fishers. Get on there, give them a follow. And thank you so much for your time today, Eric. And go Big Red.
That's right. Go Big Red.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.